This is The Medical Show with Scott Johnson and Dr. Jerry Tolbert.
Hello and welcome to The Medical Show, episode 5 of season 1. I am Scott Johnson and that's Dr. Jerry Tolbert. Hello, Jerry.
Greetings.
The doctor is in, guys.
Yes, the doctor is in.
Have I made that joke yet? Probably not.
No, but everybody does all the time, so we're good.
I was going to say, I should feel bad that I did it because I feel like it was just such low-hanging fruit. And here I am grabbing it. Oh, well.
The best jokes are classics for a reason.
That's right. Tell your kids. Or something. Hey, we're back. We got a show to do. We're going to talk about something super interesting today. A thing that I have been more exposed to in the recent years than ever in my entire life. So to me, today's subject is kind of new. Mm-hmm. But also, it turns out that maybe it's a bit much, even in my case. Like, I got questions about labs and why are they so frequent. We'll get to all of that. How much testing do you really need every day in your medical life and all that sort of thing? We got a great question to start us off, though, today. This is not totally related, but Warpforge asked this question. Can you guys, a very short one, can you guys talk about prebiotics and probiotics? There's a lot of talk about if you're taking them prebiotics or probiotics, your gut health's better and you're going to live longer and all that stuff. And something tells me that Dr. Jerry's going to say they're not as effective as people think. I don't know why. I just think that's what you're going to say. I could be wrong.
I need your correct answer ding here so that I can play it. It's absolutely accurate. There is limited evidence to show significant benefit, is probably the scientific phrasing that I would use. To say that they are not beneficial at all is impossible because there is some level of benefit, especially if you have Clostridium or Clostridioides difficile, C. diff, sometimes you hear it called. It's an infection that can affect the colon, and you need a preponderance of good bacteria to overwhelm the bad ones. That's how we treat that most of the time. We do use antibiotics to kill off the bad bacteria, but we want to replace them with something good.
All right.
So in that situation, a probiotic, absolutely a good idea. Most probiotics, just to define terms, a prebiotic is basically fiber. That's really what it is. It's bacteria food. So you're giving the bacteria that are in your gut something to gnaw down on so that they can grow.
Got it. Anything in particular that you like when you say fiber? Is that everything from psyllium husk to I had a salad today? Like,
kind of. I mean, those are all forms of prebiotics by definition. Okay. But most of the time, what we're talking about is something that's been prepackaged. So it's going to be a capsule that contains a bunch of different types of fiber that are specifically going to be good food for the gut bacteria we're trying to encourage.
Okay, got it. Interesting. So if a doctor or anybody says, well, hey, if you take this, men's probiotic in the afternoon, you're gonna poop like a genius. It's gonna be amazing. You're never gonna have a stomach ache again. You're gonna have all these things. You would take that with a grain of salt, and perhaps, like, how much of this stuff is destroyed on entering your stomach, and it won't matter anyway. It's never gonna get to the gut.
It's getting into the gut. It's food. It's basically it's the equivalent of eating your salad in terms of what you're doing. You're providing food for yourself and for your bacteria, primarily for the bacteria, but a lot of it's going to be just breakdown. It's broken down into its constituent components so that the bacteria can eat it more easily, but it's still just food.
Okay.
So it's not doing anything magical, but it's also not doing anything, right? So it is doing something.
Sure.
But it's not the thing that they're touting that it's going to do. The first question I would always ask is, how do you poop like a genius? That's the real question. The second question would be, what are you trying to accomplish, right? So if you're trying to make sure that you have the right kinds of bacteria that are going to encourage, less gas and less breakdown byproducts of things that you are trying to eat, then these things can sometimes help with that. But are you trying to make yourself have changes that, let's say that you have diarrhea all the time, or you have constipation all the time, hard, dry stools. Either of those things, you're not going to fix it by taking a prebiotic or a probiotic. You may make it slightly better, but you're not going to change drastically what's going on inside your body by feeding those bacteria. You're doing it already whenever you eat food, especially if you eat high-fiber foods.
So talk to the doctor.
Absolutely.
In those extreme cases that you described, you don't want those people they don't need to be going to the store going, which one of these probiotics is going to, keep me off the can for the next 4 days.
Yeah.
You may have another issue going on that you want to get further diagnosed, I suppose.
Absolutely. And there may be better medications that can help with that, or safer medications, or things to talk about in terms of dietary changes that can make it much more effective than some of the prebiotic, probiotic things that are advertised.
I can tell you this. I'm a dude of a certain age. We have to get into specifics. But I do find that the occasional, like 3 or 4 of those little capsules full of psyllium husk, not necessarily, I don't even do like the brand name was what, Metamucil? Yeah, I don't do that brand name, but I take these supplements that are essentially just psyllium husk in supplement form.
Sure.
And those are great for just like, I ran around like crazy yesterday. What did I have time to eat? Taco Bell. That's not great. But these tend to, not to get too indelicate, listeners, but, bulk things up a little bit. Give you a little bit of the old smoothie, not smoothie. That's the wrong term. Just, improve the output. That's all I'm saying.
They improve stool consistency is how we would say it medically.
There you go. See, why didn't I think of that? I was trying to come up with all these words, and that was the easiest way to say it. I would recommend that for a lot of people. I don't know I guess I would ask this as a follow-up. What is the general consensus these days on things like, in particular, fiber supplements for those people who are maybe lacking fiber in their regular diet?
Nothing wrong with them. They're not dangerous in any way, shape, or form. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're likely not to be dangerous in most cases. And they are essentially just replacing the food. Like I said, when we talked about some of the supplement discussion, most supplements are replacing things that you would normally be getting out of your food. So they are food. They are not anything magical. And so the same thing's true with fiber. It is literally food that you could be putting in. And the problem with fiber, and this is the thing that people don't always understand, fiber is literally just long-chain sugars that our body doesn't have an enzyme to break down. So essentially, any part of a plant that isn't like a starch or a simple sugar is usually going to be cellulose. That's the building block material for plants. That's what fiber is. It's just another word for cellulose. And cellulose, we can't digest. Horses have figured it out by having some extra bacteria and some enzymes that do it. Cows have multiple stomachs to start breaking things down, so they have bacteria that help them do that. We don't have those kind of bacteria in general for larger chain sugars, but for to help a little bit of that breakdown, our gut bacteria that are there will break some of that down, but we ourselves cannot break it down really at all. That's why a lot of times things that are high in fiber, like corn, will come out the other end looking like they did when they came in.
Oh, that's one of those deals. I didn't know that. I always wondered about that. Now I know. I get it now. I thought it was just like one escaped the prison or something. Because there'd be times where I'll never forget when I heard this. I heard this in a bathroom once, in a public bathroom, and I heard somebody in one of the stalls go, when did I have corn? And I went, yeah, man, like just like solidarity. We all feel this way when the corn gets through unscathed. But that's what you're saying is we don't have a great way of we have no way of tearing that down, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting.
Exactly. That's part of what makes it so good for us, because any of those long chain sugars like that we don't break down, when they make it to the large intestine, especially on the right side of the large intestine, that's where a lot of water is pulled back into the stools or taken out if there's too much. And so that water balance is going to be affected by how much stuff, and that extra stuff of those undigestible sugars, that makes a difference. That's actually why we use fiber as a laxative most of the time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there you have it. Some prebiotics, probiotics, not iffy, but case by case, talk to your doctor, whatever. Exactly. But if you can eat some psyllium husk, I guess you're all right. You're fine. You're eating plants. That's what you're doing.
Basically.
I guess it's now in powder and pill form, but still someplace it grew.
It's your George Jetson plants.
There you go. Can't wait for more of that in our lives. All right, let's get to today's major discussion, which is all about blood panels, or some call it routine blood panels. Some call them labs. We need to get your labs done, or a full blood workup. I hear these different terms thrown around a lot at my doctor's office. And I'll have to admit, up to, like I was saying earlier, maybe up to the last 2-3 years, never even had a full panel done. It was just not something anyone ever did. Sometimes blood tests, but they were, kind of few and far in between. And when they would happen, it was because, well, we want to make sure this is okay. They'd check it. Oh, you're fine there. Okay, good. And we'd move on to something else. But for whatever reason, it feels like now every time I go in every 6 months or however often it is, When's the last time we did your blood panel? We should think about doing that again. Or, they want to bring it up a lot. So we've had some questions about this too. Let's get into the basics. What even is it? Why does it exist? And why does it seem like it's happening more now than before?
So the first thing to know is that there's no such thing as a routine blood panel. There's not one definition for that. So like we've talked about before, that term has a lot of different definitions, which makes it a fairly useless term when we're talking about broad spectrum looking at things.
Yeah.
It is not a single thing. It's oftentimes going to be dependent on what we're looking for. This is a good place to get into this idea of why do we do labs to begin with. And so the primary reason that we do laboratory evaluation is to answer a question. And knowing what that question is determines how often we do the labs, what kind of labs we do. It's all about adding a piece of information to our source of data that we can then use to help you figure out what to do next.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
So if we say, every year you've got to do X, Y, and Z, there may be a reason for that. Sometimes we're talking about things that are screening. So that's when we look at entire populations of people for something that is fairly prominent in that population. So in men looking for prostate cancer, and we'll talk about that. There's actually been a lot of big changes in that in the last 20 years. In women looking at breast cancer, in everybody looking at cholesterol and blood sugar. Those kinds of things are what we call screening tests. You're looking for something in everybody because we have a good test that tells us, hey, if we see this, this could become a problem for any human or anybody in this group that we're looking at.
It's preventative.
Kind of, yeah.
A form or part of preventative care, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
It gets rolled into that. And in fact, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, and again, not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but that group, it has recommendations for all of the things that we know from a scientific basis that actually give us good information, that are actually really good at telling us, is there going to be a problem in the future, and aren't going to lead to unnecessary testing, which we'll get to eventually and talk about more.
Sure.
But that governing body is who determines that. And there's been some big changes in that in the last, or talks about big changes in that in the last few weeks. So that's something we want to keep our eyes on because it's really important. Somebody that has done that science and teams of people that have done that science and looked at multiple different studies to look at what's the harm, what's the benefit, who is the group that's going to benefit from this the most. How do we make sure that they get that testing done?
Right.
So that is preventative testing, or screening is the word we would use a lot of times.
Right.
The other half are what we call diagnostic tests. And those are a lot of times the things that people are thinking about when they're thinking about tests. Like a prime example would be things like, and we're talking about blood panels for sure, but you can also add in things like CT and MRI and other stuff like that. Those are not tests that we're doing to look for something most of the time. There are exceptions to that, but they're fewer and farther between. Most of the time we see a problem and we say we need to figure out what's going on the inside. And so we do the test.
I think people sometimes forget diagnostic and diagnose are best friends. In other words, the words seem like they may mean something differently, but really you're trying to diagnose the problem. If I come into your office and I'm really tired all the time, one of your diagnostic tools might be a blood panel of some sort, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We would check blood counts to look at for things like anemia, so low blood counts, meaning you don't have enough of the cells that carry around oxygen, so you're not going to get enough energy for your cells.
Right.
We would also potentially look at things like thyroid function, because thyroid function does absolutely control kind of energy levels, quote unquote. It controls a whole lot of other stuff, but those two tests are very useful if there's fatigue and we don't know why it's there. Now, they may be negative, and that kind of rules those things out, but it's still giving us more information. We're trying to create a list of things that could be going on, and then when you use the test to either say, yeah, that's what it is, or whittle that thing off the list.
Right. And the regularity of these tests doesn't exist in the way that people think the regularity means. In other words, if you diagnose me with low iron in my blood or whatever, something's wrong with my blood, and you go, well, there it is. Now we know why you're tired. That doesn't necessarily mean that now I'm on some regimented, every 30 days I got to come in and give you blood. Necessarily, right?
Not necessarily. It's context specific. So whatever's going on in your body, let's say that you have iron deficiency anemia. So you use that. We've talked about that one before.
Sounds
boiling
good.
The rusty nails. You drink that water, and then you come back and see me in 6 weeks and we check it again, right?
Yep.
So if we check it and it's improving, we may not need to check it again for a while. But at that point, we're monitoring you to see if our treatment is actually effectively working. We say, okay, you take this supplement, this iron supplement. It should improve your red blood cell count. And it is, we prove that by doing the test to see if it's actually improving your red blood cell count. If it is, then you continue to take the iron supplement until the red blood cell count gets back to where it needs to be. And once we see that, once we've seen that on the labs after every couple of months or so checking, we can then stop the iron supplement and we just watch to make sure that everything's okay. And then you may never have to have it checked again as long as you're not having more symptoms.
All right. So if let's say you get to that stage, you do the supplements to the point that the person's no longer dead tired all the time, or it seems to be working. And it's both observable from a symptomatic point of view, but also the results from the most recent blood test are also confirming iron levels are back where they should be. That is the kind of thing that, unlike, I don't know, hormones or something else, you can let go now and the body will balance it potentially. They may, maybe they're prone to a problem and there's some other underlying disease, but it's not like, hey, you're on iron for the rest of your life, buddy. Sorry. Right?
Correct.
Okay. And the only way you know that is both observing symptoms, and then if the symptoms indicate a problem, then you go further, which is, like you said, you diagnose using diagnostic tools, which in this case, a blood test to check for your iron levels.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it.
Okay.
Basically, what we're looking at is there a problem? Do we know why it's happening? So let's say that you had surgery, and then when you come out of surgery, your blood counts are low because you lost some blood during the surgery. That's a temporary condition. That is not a lifelong issue.
Right.
It's going to be very different than if you say, we check your blood and it turns out you have sickle cell disease. So you have hemoglobin that doesn't fold the right way. Doesn't fold the way that we expect it to. Let's put it that way, because there's no right or wrong, obviously. But it folds in a different way. That means that the cells don't carry oxygen as efficiently, and that can lead to some problems with the cells kind of changing shape, and then you don't get oxygen transport the right way. So sickle cell disease, that's the problem. Well, in that situation, that is a genetic disease. All of your red blood cells have that issue, and unless we do some type of gene therapy or other things that don't really exist on a large scale right now, you're going to have a problem with that for the rest of your life. So it's something that we're going to be looking at off and on for years and years and years.
Like cancer screenings, like...
kind of. For them, though, it's still diagnostic.
Right.
So cancer screenings are screening tests, whereas for somebody that has a disease process, it's a surveillance, or it's still diagnostic, but it's surveillance, not screening. We're not trying to see if everybody has that problem.
I see.
We're saying, okay, we need to do surveillance on this, and that's maybe a third category if you want to categorize it that way, where we're looking at something over time to make sure that it's staying where it needs to be once we know there's a problem.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of hype around this idea of full body scans or ultra detailed blood testing and regular ultra detailed blood testing. I see it in like Instagram videos. Like, what you need to do is get that full body scan, start from zero, and reset your manhood or whatever the crap's going on there. Are we creeping into over testing territory with all this new technology? That is the one big difference now. Technology and medical science have always kind of been, friends, but and they grow sort of together. But it feels like more now than ever, our arsenal of diagnostic equipment, tools, methods has never been greater to both good and ill, and the ill part being maybe over-diagnosing or over-screening or just overdoing it in general. Is that a problem right now? And is anything being done to curb it?
The short answer is yes, it is a problem. We haven't just started diving in. We're both feet. We're up to our chins at this point. In fact, we're so deep that back in the early 20-teens, there was a program created called Choosing Wisely or Choose Wisely. And it was created by all the major medical groups, so internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics. And we came up with this idea of what things are we doing way too often or way too much or in a wrong way. And so we've got a list of tests. And one of those that I mentioned earlier is a test called a PSA, or a prostate-specific antigen. So that's a test that we look at as a cancer screening back in the day. We used to do it every year on every man for many years. And what we figured out when we did that was there were a lot of false positive tests. And that's the problem with things like full body scans and certain types of laboratory values, especially things that are not great screening tests. And we sometimes don't find that out until we've tried to use them for a while. But essentially, you get a lot of overcall of a problem. So we call that a false positive test. Sometimes Sometimes just as bad or even worse in some cases would be a false negative test. So we want to look at the rate of that kind of change. And so there's a lot of different terms. There's a lot of statistics that go into how we look at a lab and what it means and how useful it is. And that's true for imaging as well. So a full body MRI, there was actually just an article a couple of days ago in one of the big newspapers about doing full body MRI and why are we not doing it? What's the benefit? And should, every rich person that can afford it get one done, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they touched on, and I think they could have gone deeper on, is this idea of there's a lot of false positive information that comes out of that. And when we talk about a false positive, so sometimes you'll hear things like sensitivity or specificity. The idea is, are we finding the thing we're looking for?
Yeah.
Right? So if you do a full body MRI, what are you looking for?
I mean, let me try to answer that with some knowledge. If I'm doing an MRI, I'm looking for differences from the norm. So I'm like, okay, there's a weird black spot because I know you have to drink that dye. I did one of these.
Not always. Yeah,
not always,
but for a full body MRI, you shouldn't have to drink anything. But
that's good to know.
Yeah,
that thing
so
sucked.
if somebody makes you drink a bunch of stuff for a full body MRI, they may be doing something else. So in terms of a full body MRI, you're looking for differences from the norm. That's actually true of most tests. We want something that's different from the expected range.
Right.
Right. And that the question becomes, what do we do with that difference?
Right.
If it's a difference that we have a reason to understand that that's a problem, great. If we're looking for that difference specifically, that's a great test.
Sure.
If we're just doing show me what's different in these two pictures, that's really the information level that we're getting back. If I see a black spot where there should be a white spot, does that mean anything?
You're right.
Should that be a white spot in everybody? Do we do MRIs on everybody and figure out, 90% of the population have that white spot, but the 10% I was looking at, they all have the black spot, so it's not really a problem.
Do you have people who the reason that you finally get the test that maybe is unnecessary or less necessary is because they're freaking out and just demand that we look at everything? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
That absolutely happens, yes.
Yeah.
But
how do you handle that? That just seems like a tricky thing to talk to a patient about, where they're dead set on it and you're like, you don't need it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question because it's a perfect segue into how we should be doing this.
Right.
Which is, we need to have a conversation about what's going on. We need to talk about, when we talk about these tests, we shouldn't just be saying, we need to do this test and this test and this test, and we need to get this blood work and we need to do this thing. If we do that, we are essentially saying the test is the answer. The test is the real thing, right? The test is the thing that gives us the answer. And that's rarely the case. Most of the time, we come up with an idea of what we think's going on because we've talked to you, because we've asked you a bunch of questions. We've come to a conclusion that, hey, in the context of you're, a 60-year-old white male with high blood pressure and your cholesterol in the past has been elevated and you come in and you've got chest pain, one of the first things we're going to have on our list is potential myocardial infarction, heart attack, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to make this as broad and simple as I can.
Right.
But this idea of you have these risk factors, you are a person who is at risk for these conditions, and you have symptoms that are consistent with that condition, and we've talked about it. Well, yeah, that lab to check to see if you're having a heart attack, doing an EKG and something called a troponin, which is a heart muscle breakdown byproduct that we see in the blood. We do those two tests, and we can take the information from those two tests and decide, is it more likely that you're having a heart attack or is it less likely that you're having a heart attack?
Okay.
And so we have to have that conversation. We need to come into it saying, okay, you are a 30-year-old, otherwise healthy, no problems in the past with blood sugar, cholesterol. You've never had any kind of family history of heart problems, and you come in and you have chest pain, right?
Yeah.
That is a much less likely situation to have a heart attack. It's not zero. We still have to pay attention.
Right.
But at that point, doing all of that testing right away is not going to be the first thing on the list. It's going to be on the list, but we're going to be looking at other things. We're going to want to talk about the context of the pain. Is it on the right side or the left side? Is it happening when you swallow? Is it happening right after you had like 3 beers and a bunch of chili? There's a difference here, in terms of the context.
The answer is yes to that last one, by the way. Almost every single time. For me. Yeah. It's never a heart attack. It's always the chili. That's interesting. I have to think you get a fair amount of this. I just have to imagine it. But we live in a world now where somebody can pick up their phone and can randomly just get fed about 500 varying degrees of accuracy messages about their health by just logging into TikTok for 20 minutes. And especially if the algorithm starts to feed them content that the algorithm thinks these people want, but really it's because they're paranoid because they're not sure if that chest pain is something worse than it probably is. So now they're getting a ton of stuff suggesting a bunch of things. How often do people come into your office and go, well, I read this thing, on TikTok or Instagram, and they said I definitely have this, or this is a problem, or should I check this? And then what do you do to deal with that? Because that's new. That part is new.
Kind of.
Generationally speaking, right?
Yeah, kind of. Although I will say that as long as I've been a doctor here, as long as I've been doing this, even back in medical school, Dr. Google was still around.
That's true.
And because I grew up with Dr. Google, this isn't as much of a surprise to me as it might be to some of the older guys in my same profession. But the idea is people are always looking for, as a patient, most of the time, what's our goal? Our goal is to try to stop it from happening now and keep it from happening again, right? We're here for a good reason. And so if you have an answer when you walk in, sometimes that speeds up the process. And that's what we're all about. As humans, we like things that speed up the process because our brain doesn't want to have to work extra hard.
Right.
So we jump straight to the conclusion. Diagnostics and medicine. So how do I handle it when that comes in? Because it does. It comes in all the time, and it has since I started.
Yeah.
The key there is we have to have a conversation about the starting point. And so what my normal response to that is, that could absolutely be what's going on, but let's start from the symptoms. Let's start from what's happening, and let's work toward that diagnosis together so that we can make sure that we're not missing things that could point us down a different pathway.
Gotcha. Can too much testing be harmful, though? In other words, I know it's harmful to especially in the healthcare system that is kind of for profit and difficult to get certain tests and insurance companies approving things and things like that in the States. So I know about that financial pain. But if I go in and get 10 labs this year, and you really only needed one set of blood labs for one diagnostic trip, but for whatever reason your doctor's blood happy and he did 10 of them, what is the actual harm in that?
Physically, you're not going to give enough blood in most cases unless you're giving a whole lot of blood for it to affect things like make you anemic or do other stuff like that. We joke about it all the time, but in terms of the actual physical damage, it's relatively small for giving a bunch of blood.
Okay.
The problem with those labs causing trouble and when they can be harmful is when they lead to extra unnecessary testing. So that's what I was talking about earlier with the PSA. Let's talk about that in depth right now because that's actually a very good.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's say you have a PSA test done. You're a 55-year-old male. You have no family history of prostate cancer. You have a PSA test done, and the normal range in most labs is from about 0.5 to 4. That's a broad generalization. In different labs, it's going to be slightly different, but we're going to use those numbers because the math's easy. So let's say you go in and you have a PSA of 4.5. And we just did it as a blanket test. Everybody that comes through the door, we do a PSA, we do cholesterol, we do blood sugar, and we get all those tests. And and we do thyroid function and blood counts. We get all these labs for everybody every year. Well, if we are not talking to you about what you do on a regular basis, and you come back with a PSA of 4.5, that is a flag for us that there's something going on with the prostate. It's outside the normal range. It's not hugely outside, but it's still outside.
Yeah.
And it's high enough that we cannot ignore it once we see it, because if we ignore it and you have prostate cancer, we are now responsible for you having prostate cancer that has been ignored.
Right.
Right.
And potentially it metastasized or gotten worse because you didn't.
Exactly. Because if we don't do it at that point and you come back a year from now and it's everywhere in your body, that's my fault.
Right.
And that's bad medicine. That's not something we want to happen.
Yeah, that's anti-hypocritical.
Exactly. Yeah. Anti-hypocritical. That's a great.
It doesn't quite roll off the tongue. We'll have to workshop that a little bit.
It's the Greek version.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a Roman equivalent.
But there's
anyway.
Oh yeah, keep going.
So what I was going to say is, but if I had sat you down and said, okay, yesterday before you had that blood drawn, did you do anything that would have potentially caused that number to be high, like riding a bicycle? And so if you say yes, then I'm going to have a much lower index of suspicion for cancer and a bigger index of suspicion for an abnormally high test for no reason. So either way, we should be testing it again in a few months. Yeah. So usually the magic number that gets quoted is around 9 weeks or so about 2 months.
Yeah.
We check it again. We see where it is. And if it's still high, then you need to have evaluation done. The problem when we do that on every man every year is that we're going to get people that have random elevations for different reasons. They sit too much, they ride a bicycle. Recent ejaculation can be a reason for that to be elevated, PSA to be elevated. So if we don't tell you that before you have the blood drawn, and you have
how recent, by the way? Like in the parking lot recent?
No, like day before.
Okay.
I tried to get through that smoothly.
I know you were really hauling Abe through there, but I just thought, I need to understand recent. Let's define recent. But all right, fair enough.
Which is fine. It's a valid question.
Sure.
But let's say that happened and we didn't talk about it, but we just looked at the numbers. Then we're going to send you to the urologist and they're going to do an ultrasound or an MRI or a biopsy, worst case scenario, because biopsies can lead to all kinds of problems like incontinence or erectile dysfunction or other stuff.
Sure.
And so now they've done all that testing because you rode your bicycle.
Oh, man.
Right? Is that the reason we want to do it? No, we want to do it to prevent a cancer.
Yeah.
And so we can't just take the numbers as the only thing we're looking at. People are more than just numbers. They are more than just labs. They are a conglomeration of several thousand different things that we have to be taking into account.
Is there a reason why? So one of the things that you hear a lot about are there are a lot of home lab kits for a lot of things. Pregnancy tests is a good example of this. It's been around for a while, but it's a way at home to tell. And it used to be you had to kill a rabbit and 3 monkeys or whatever you did. I don't know what you did.
So the rabbit could die, and if the rabbit did die because you're injecting it with the urine, that is. The human HCG that's there can kill the rabbit, and there's a whole reason that happens, and it's a big, long explanation. But suffice it to say that, yes, that was a way that we used to do things a very long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long, long time ago, like pretty ancient science at this point.
Yep.
But there's so much you can do at home now from, I can't even think of them all. But there's all
testing?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I noticed, by the way, is that A1C testing never seems to come home. And I used to think it's just because people are dragging their feet, or it's just like, what's the problem? What's the holdup? And this conversation is actually adding some context to this, because with all these home lab testing kits of various kinds to do various things, it seems like you get closer and closer to at least running the risk of over self-diagnosis to the point of that just getting out of control. And now your patient is, losing their mind because they think they've found 4 problems that literally weren't there. They just have faulty equipment, or they don't know what they're doing, or they ate wrong before they took a test, or whatever it is. That's a pretty bad risk, right? Being able to...
Yeah, that's part of the reason why a lot of those things are not necessarily home testing, why you're not doing your home cholesterol testing on a regular basis. It's also because the machines to interpret that and to do it accurately and consistently are really expensive.
Yeah.
The machines that we use in our office have come down in price drastically. We can do them in the office now in some cases, like an A1C, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And a fingerstick glucose machine, that is an amazing thing. A CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, in the right context for somebody who has problems, especially type 1 diabetics, it's a massive leap forward, right? We're talking light years ahead of where we were even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that kind of home testing is absolutely good. Having home COVID testing, or having home, even now there's some home urine testing if done correctly, if you follow the instructions and you do it the right way, can give you an idea if you have a urinary tract infection. That kind of stuff has become a lot more available and a lot easier to interpret and a lot more simplistic. I don't want to call it idiot proof because that has a negative connotation, but it's done in such a way that it's hard for you to mess it up, and the result is trustable, right? It's trustworthy.
Right.
And so we want a test. If we're doing a screening test or we're doing a diagnostic test, we want to be able to trust the result. We want to be able to apply it to what's going on consistently.
Okay. Consistency seems like the key word there.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Consistency and context are your 2 biggest things when it comes to anything that we're talking about.
The 2 C's.
Yeah, there you go.
See, we just coined it. We had 3 C's, coin, CCC, triple C.
Chronic conditions.
Yeah, welcome to triple C, everybody. So with people with more chronic conditions like high blood pressure or diabetics, how does their lab testing schedule differ from a generally healthy person? If you've got somebody with type 2 diabetes and you have somebody who's just, I'm feeling tired, you're going to treat those 2 differently when you do not just your initial diagnostic testing, but your screening as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So for diabetes, we want to screen a whole lot of different things, because diabetes is what's called a cardiovascular risk factor equivalent, or cardiovascular disease risk equivalent. Essentially, if you have diabetes, it's like saying you have heart disease. And so
really?
The reason we care about, absolutely. And so the reason we care about it is because the risk of heart attack and stroke goes through the roof. Well, what other things affect heart attack and stroke? Well, if you have diabetes, we want to make sure we're looking at your blood sugars, but we also want to be focusing on blood pressure. We want to look at your cholesterol. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to all of the other vascular risk factors, things like smoking, because all of those are stacking on top of something that is already a massive risk factor, right?
Oh,
so
gotcha.
we're going to look at that stuff in diabetics more closely than we would in somebody who is just coming in because they're tired.
Right.
The other thing that we look at, and we mentioned this test earlier, you mentioned the hemoglobin A1C test. That test we do every 3 months or every 6 months, depending on what the situation is, how well things are controlled. But the reason we do it every 3 months and not more frequently, and the reason why having a home test wouldn't be a great idea, is because that test is only comparable. So you can only take a value and compare it to another value if you do it every 90 days.
Right. It takes that long to see the difference, right?
Right. Well, but for a very specific reason. Our red blood cells live for 90 days.
Oh.
And what we are measuring, an A1C is a percentage. So on the hemoglobin molecule, there is a position on that molecule. You've seen the little bubbles that link together that we make molecules out of.
Yeah.
On that molecule, there's a position called A1C. And in that position, if there is a sugar bound to that molecule, that is that adds to the total percent. Whatever percentage of molecules have that sugar in the A1C position is the number that we're getting on that test. Red blood cells live for 90 days. So if we measure all the red blood cells in your body today and see what percentage have that molecule on them,
Yeah.
then we have to wait for all those cells to die off before we can get a comparable set of red blood cells. So we have to wait 90 days until all the blood cells that were born today, they will die 90 days from now.
Why does nobody explain these things except this first time I'm hearing this? So I have a high, I have a little bit of a high level right now. I'm on the good side of the line.
Okay.
I ate a cookie today. I don't know if that'll push me over. Probably
it's an average
not.
across 3 months.
Yeah, it's an average over 3 months. But doing, my last test was good, and that made me very happy. And so being on that side of the line feels good. Found out that I've got some family history of this. Didn't know that. Also some family history of heart stuff, which may be all tied together for all I knew. But again, we're coming from a different era, and who knows? I've always been told about all right, we're going to test in another 3 months. That will show us the difference if there's going to be one, blah, 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 up or down. But they've never said why the 3 months. I like hearing the reason. That's great. That's scientific to me. That's interesting. And also I get the math of that. And also I didn't know they only live 3 months. Does anybody have any real rascally red blood cells where they're like, I got another month out of these guys? Does that ever happen?
There are outliers to everything that we talk about, right? We always talk in ranges when we talk about stuff biologically because, there are going to be times where things live a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. Those sickle cells that I talked about earlier, they die a lot quicker, so they don't last 90 days. So that's why anemia tends to happen because you can't pump them out as fast as you need them because they're dying off too quickly. So there are always exceptions to the rule, but in general, most people, 90 days, that's your number.
Okay, if you're just a dude... you're out there, you're living your life, everything's going good. You don't have any weird pre-existing conditions. You don't have something your father passed down to you, whatever. You're just doing great. When should people request this, or should they ever? Should it always just be, I went for my annual, my doctor said maybe do a blood test because they're a little worried about my, I don't know, blood vessels in my eyeball or something dumb, whatever it is.
No, that's
Are you waiting for that every time, or should people be proactive about, I need to get blood work done? I don't know. Who starts that? Where's the bird and where's the egg?
Well, so let's talk about the blood vessels in the eyeball. That's actually, you hit on something that is incredibly important.
Really?
And it's one way, yeah. So the blood vessels in your eyeball on the retina are some of the only blood vessels we can watch work without cutting you open because of the way the eye works.
Oh,
so we can actually see inside your eye to see the back of it where all the blood vessels are. And we can watch those vessels and we can see changes in them with diabetes and high blood pressure and other disease processes. So from that standpoint, there are times where the eye doctor will send somebody to me and say, this person has high blood pressure or this person has diabetes that's never been diagnosed before.
Right. And that can happen kind of late in the game, right? That's kind of a late game sort of thing.
Kind of.
It can be.
It's all of the things for finding this stuff is usually late in the game. By the time you're having symptoms that we can recognize very clearly, you've been dealing with it for a while. So that is why it's still very important that we pay attention to that. So that is one category of folks where you want to get those labs done when you find that problem. So that is more diagnostic. We're looking to see if that's an issue, and then we take that to the next level. If you're talking about screening, those guidelines are set down by that USPSTF that I talked about earlier. That's the group of people that say, okay, all the data says that women at 40 should have mammograms done because that's when we can catch breast cancers early enough without having too much of an overcall rate that we do a bunch of unnecessary breast biopsies and cause unnecessary harm and stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So 40 is where we start. Or 5 years before your youngest relative that had breast cancer, if you have a family history of breast cancer. There are guidelines, right?
Okay,
And so those
sure.
guidelines dictate what's going on. So that's a conversation with your doctor, or you can even look the guidelines up yourself. We're not gatekeeping that information. And so if you go to the USPSTF, United States Preventative Services Task Force, they have a website. You can type in the information. It has drop-down menus. And you can put in your age and your gender and whether you smoke and any history that you know about, any medications that you take, all of those things. You put it all in, and it will generate for you a list of the things that we typically recommend as being really good at catching something if you're in that category.
Okay, interesting. And that's something people can proactively take control of and do themselves. I mean,
Absolutely. Print it out and take it with you so your doctor can look at it with you and go over it.
And it's a fairly standardized thing for everybody, right?
It is the gold standard in the United States, or at least it was up until this week.
Oh, I was going to ask you. I realize this is a whole other episode, but this $500 million cut on RNA vaccine stuff research, I have a feeling that's bad.
Yeah, there's been so much promise. We were getting close to HIV vaccines, and this is not me saying that these are all things that we're going to lose. This is just stuff that the research was helping us move closer on. It doesn't necessarily mean it was going to be mRNA that did it, but we're thinking outside the box with this kind of technology, and we have human usage of it now, and we have better data to show that it's safe and effective. And we were looking at even potentially coming up with vaccines that could help prevent certain cancers. I mean, this is technology that could be leading to amazing breakthroughs in medicine, and it's going to be similar to the discussions that we had with stem cells back 20 years ago at this point. This idea that the technology is not the same as the hype. There's a lot of misinformation about what it means and how it works and what it's going to do, and because of that, it's going to set that technology back decades. If
I had $500 billion, I would go ahead and give it right back to whoever needs the research.
Yeah.
Just go for it. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of cash. I just, I'm a little short.
I'm not even close to that. I'm well off. Don't get me wrong. We, as doctors, get paid very, very well. I'm not going to ever deny that. But at the same time, I don't have $500 million. If we could figure out a way that we could either drop the price of that research or bring that money back, it would be one of the biggest investments that we could make as a society. Even if we just all contributed, if the 300 million people in the United States contributed $1, we or $2, I guess, that would be a $2 investment that you would get return on massively over the next 2 decades.
Yeah.
Because
the way I look at it too, it's like there are kids today with conditions and life expectancies that could have seen it potentially a massive turnaround in their story.
Yep.
That won't now. Like, it's not even to say that this will never happen, that we can't get there, that we can't, triumph and get the research eventually. Because a lot of things go. You get there eventually.
Yeah.
But how much life is lost in the time that we now have to delay it,
Yep.
I don't know. It's easy to get hyperbolic about it, but I feel like this is pretty easy to get your head around. It's like if you don't have the research money and you stall a bunch of this stuff or end a bunch of projects or whatever, when are you going to do it? When someone else comes in and then prioritizes it again, and then that gets pulled again, and then why do we do this to ourselves? It's so dumb.
The yo-yo is not good for research because people want things that are going to be long-term investments. That's what a lot of research, like especially at colleges and universities, they want research that's going to continue to bring in people. It's going to continue to bring in prestige. They want that so that that's where the money's going to go. And so if it's back and forth, they're going to only bet on sure things every single time.
Yeah.
And that's going to make it hard.
Which is usually short-term too. Short-term stuff is, it's not a lot of thinking going into that.
Absolutely.
All right. If you could wave a magic wand and have every adult get just one set of regular labs on some regular basis, what would be on that list, and why will the answer surprise me?
So
we're buttering up the people. They like this when you say, and the answer may surprise you. So we just link baited them.
Will.
Yep.
Yeah, and the answer will surprise you.
Yep.
So the short answer is there is not a list that I would put on together for that. It is not universal. So if you say adult, are we talking 18 to 45? Are we talking 18 to 65? Because that is not a universal set of things that I would want done.
Right.
That list that the USPSTF comes out with, or things that are coming associated with that, are going to be the main way to look at it. So we already kind of spilled the candy in the lobby on that one as far as waving the magic wand.
Yeah.
But if you were going to hold a gun to my head and say pick a lab, the very first one would be just a blood sugar. It is something that we can test very easily. We can see trends in it on a regular basis. And diabetes is going to be one of the leading causes of downstream complication and further disease, what we call morbidity and mortality. Morbidity means disease process. Mortality means death. And so the leading cause of morbidity and mortality is behavior, and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is a behavioral disease.
Yeah.
We also will catch type 1 diabetes in young children more if we're doing a blood sugar on everybody. It's not something that would be cost effective to do. The complications from doing it would more outweigh the benefit from doing it on a semi-regular basis. But we already do it so frequently already that it wouldn't be that much of a change.
Okay.
So if I had to wave my wand, that would be the one test that I would say everybody needs to check.
Yeah.
At least in the United States.
We're all eating donuts and stupid stuff, man.
Well, even bananas. So a banana, and this is going to be a controversial statement. I will preface by saying that. But a banana and a Snickers bar have the exact same number of grams of carbohydrate, total carbohydrate. They are different forms of sugars, but your body does not care, because when we break things down, we break them down into single individual molecules before we digest them.
Yeah.
So fructose, glucose, each of those things is digested independently. So if we're talking about fructose from a banana or from high fructose corn syrup, there is no difference in the molecule. Your body treats them exactly the same way. Does that mean I want you to eat a banana or a Snickers bar, either one? No. The thing is that they both have way too much sugar for what we need most of the time.
Stupid bananas, man. Why'd they have to be like that?
You can eat some. Eat half a banana. Don't have a whole one.
There you go.
But again, moderation in all things. But the idea there is there's not this big negative horrible thing about, oh, well, we eat too much ice cream, we eat too many donuts. That's true in a lot of different cases. There are a lot of things that we eat too much of. That's not wrong. But there are things that are considered healthy, and we've had that discussion before,
sure,
that we do too much of as well.
Yeah.
And so
people are always saying, do all your fruits and vegetables, and they forget, well, most of the fruits, when you're talking fruits, are going to be high in sugar.
Sugar, yeah,
and,
exactly.
And if you think you're swapping that out for the candy you were eating, bad news, you know?
Healthy sugar.
Which is, there's no such, well, I mean, sugar is sugar, but there's no, it's just,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just sugar. It is what
it's a
it
molecule.
is. Yeah.
It is a chemical compound that contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a set ratio. I mean, that's all it is.
There's your takeaway. I like that. Also, I ate some things today I maybe shouldn't have. I'm just going to point it out real quick. I had butter coconut biscuits from an Asian market. Now, here's why I liked these. Because their sugar content is way less than any equivalent. They're still a little high, but they're pretty low. They're pretty low.
That was just the quickest backpedal.
Yeah. Have you ever seen me backpedal so hard in my life? Well, anyway, yeah.
So those kinds of things, if it brings you joy to have a cookie, have a cookie. If it brings you joy to have a banana, have a banana. Just don't make it something that you do every single day, all day long, right? That's the key to this. Everything in moderation. Everything is the difference between a medicine and a poison is the dose. You want to make sure that you're doing things in the right way at the right time. And again, having a healthy relationship in this case is incredibly important. We want to make sure that we're talking about these things, that we're asking the questions, that we're looking for good sources of information. That's true for the labs, the same way. We want to make sure that you talk to the people that understand how the labs work and what they do, that understand sensitivity and specificity and positive predictive value and negative predictive value, and what is this lab going to tell me? What is the actual boots on the ground application of this information? That's what we really need. And so asking for a test, if you walk into the doctor's office and you say, give me this test, most doctors are going to bristle at that. And it's a warning to patients. I don't want you to set somebody off when you don't mean to. You're trying to get information. You want to know why you feel bad.
Actually why. Not,
that's very valid.
Not just tests to make you feel better that you're looking in every corner, like really feel, like really know. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with
that.
And
understand what's going on, right? So that's a valid feeling. So when you go in, say, I think this may be what's going on. Can we talk about that? Can we at least address that? If you ask it from that direction, there are very few doctors that are going to get their hackles up because of that.
Right.
They're going to say, yeah, let's talk about it. And they may say that's probably not what's going on. Mm-hmm. There may be hopefully they're not going to be dismissive. If they are, find somebody that's going to listen and at least go through it with you. Why, right? Why do you feel that way? And it may be a long explanation. And in some visits, if you're only in there for 10 minutes, they're not going to be able to explain that well. So make sure that you're budgeting the time, that you're finding somebody that's willing to answer those questions. If you're trying to do the research yourself, don't start from the final answer. Start from the question. This is what's going on, and be very specific. And that can be hard because we don't always have the terms, right? Yeah. I talked about learning a whole new language. But when we talk about tests, we need to know those terms.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be tests that are for certain parts of that problem versus other parts of that problem. And if we're doing the wrong test, we're going to get the wrong answer.
All right. I have one piece of advice from my direction to people at home. If you like getting information from YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, the Liver King is not your personal nutritionist. People like that are making a lot of money telling you a lot of ho-ho. All right. Talk to a real doctor. Talk to people who know. Don't just do what the big sweaty guy with bulging veins tells you to do on Instagram. All right.
Amen.
There you go. No offense to him personally. I don't know him, but you just gotta watch it. Well, there you go. It is. This is one of my favorite episodes. I love this one. This is good stuff. Don't get too many labs. That's the point. Don't get over tested, but work with your doctor. Talk about your stuff. Get it all worked out. And in the meantime, know that next week will be our finale for this season. Where we go from here and how quick, we don't know yet. We'll talk about that. We want to do more. I think that we'll probably end up doing a season 2 is my guess. But what will we do for our final episode, our finale? What magic wand will we pull out and blow your minds with? Probably not magic, and probably won't blow your mind, but it'll be great. I know that. So tune in next week for more of that. In the meantime, you can contact us here anytime at voicecast.app/medical. That's linked right over on our website, which is themedical.show. You also find a way to enter a quick email or any other way of contacting us. It's all there. If you've got questions, we are happy to answer them. Our Discord is kind of popping too, so head on over there and check out that group. Dr. Jerry's always in there answering questions, so if you got a big one, get in there and get it done. frogpants.com/discord. And that is going to do it for us, for myself. I don't know why I went with that. Why did I say myself? Anyway, whatever. We're all learning as we go. Anyway, for myself, I'm Scott Johnson. And for Dr. Jerry Tolbert, who is right over there, we thank you for listening, for watching, or however you consume us. And we look forward to talking to you next week right here on The Medical Show.
Frog in Pants. If you're looking for something froggy smooth, find more at frogpants.com.